Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to AAPI Immigrant Justice, a five-part webinar series hosted by Asian Americans Advancing Justice Southern California, or AJSOCAL. My name is Marilise Robinson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the National Policy Strategist at AJSOCAL. AJSOCAL is a social justice organization that protects and strengthens the rights and dignity of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or AAPI, communities, especially those that are most disadvantaged. As the nation's largest AAPI legal service and social justice organization, we advocate for policies that promote an inclusive and equitable community for all, in which AAPIs are empowered and thrive. Thank you for joining us this week to learn more about AAPI immigration through the lens of data collection, healthcare, narrative shaping, and domestic violence and abuse. In a time of virulent animosity towards immigrants, coinciding with significant anti-Asian hate, the AAPI community is currently enduring what history will remember as one of its greatest challenges. The AAPI community is the fastest growing racial and ethnic group, with over half of Asian Americans being born in another country. That means most members of our community are related to or are themselves an immigrant. Immigration is core to the AAPI identity and has broad-reaching impacts on our communities. However, when we talk about immigration to the United States, it is often spoken in broad, sweeping terms, leaving out the nuance and unique experiences of immigrant communities, including the AAPI community. This renders our community's experiences invisible and susceptible to stereotypes or generalizations that can inadvertently cause lasting harm on our community's fight for equity and justice. For example, the model minority myth tells a narrow story of the AAPI community, that Asian and Pacific Islander communities are universally successful, self-sufficient, and unaffected by systematic barriers. But that story isn't just inaccurate, it's dangerous. It obscures real disparities, silences our community struggles, and is often used to pit our communities against one another rather than build solidarity across movements for justice. The truth is that AAPI immigrant experiences are incredibly diverse. Our communities include refugees, asylum seekers, DACA recipients, mixed status families, families trying to reunite, essential workers, small business owners, and generations navigating trauma, displacement, and resilience. Many face barriers related to language access, labor exploitation, housing instability, and immigration enforcement. And throughout this week, AJSOCAL staff and community partners will walk us through some of the many challenges AAPI communities face and how we as allies, advocates, and community members can better support AAPI communities. Over the coming days, AJSOCAL staff and community partners will share stories, data, and lived experiences that challenge the stereotypes and deepen our understanding of AAPI immigrant realities. Thank you for committing your time and attention to this week of learning. We're excited to be on this journey together and to build a more inclusive and honest immigration narrative. For today's webinar, we will be utilizing the Q&A feature, so please go to the bottom of your screen and drop your questions in as they come to you throughout the presentation, and we will make sure to take some time at the end to answer as many of these questions as possible. At this time, I'd now like to welcome our experts on screen. We have Yannan Lukia and Stephen Zhang, who will share more about the data around AAPI immigration and our communities.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Zhang, he, him pronouns, and I'm a senior research analyst with the Demographics Research Project here at AJSOCAL.
Hi everyone, my name is Yannan Lukia, also senior research analyst at AJSOCAL and she, her pronouns. I would like to introduce our team first. So the Demographic Research Project team is a research arm of the AJSOCAL, and we provide training and technical assistance on the use of census data. We also support redistricting mapping and advocacy, collaborate with our partners to do community-centered research, and provide research and data support to AJSOCAL programs. And since this is the first workshop of our AAPI Immigrant Justice Virtual Learning Series, to set the stage, we like to share key facts about AAPI immigrant communities, including their population, their immigration pathways, their contribution to the society, and their socioeconomic status. Embrace yourself, since this workshop will be a little bit data heavy. However, we hope it will help you uncover the diversity within this already very diverse community, highlight the challenges faced by AAPI immigrants and demonstrate how immigration is an AAPI issue. The United States is home to over 24 million Asian Americans. Among them, nearly 12.7 million are immigrants born outside the United States, known as foreign-born. This group takes over the half of the Asian American population. The immigrant community of Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders is smaller in terms of population. Still, there are over 242,000 of foreign-born NHPIs in the U.S., accounting for 16% of the 1.6 million NHPIs. These slides listed the percentage of population being foreign-born by race and ethnic groups. The green bar here represents the major races, whereas the blue bar here represents the ANHPI ethnic groups. So here, the Asian American with 56% of the population being foreign-born rank the highest across races, whereas NHPIs rank the third highest across races. The foreign-born rates vary wildly across ANHPI ethnic groups, ranging from 2% among Native Hawaiians to 80% among Bhutanese. The census used the term foreign-born to describe the immigrant community. When we talk about immigrants in our daily life, who are we exactly referring to? Here, we made a list of those groups fall under immigrants or migrants concepts. The naturalized citizens are foreign nationals who immigrated to the U.S. and become U.S. citizens through naturalization. Lawful permanent residents, commonly known as green card holders, are foreign-born people who can live permanently in the U.S., work in most jobs without getting a work visa, and travel in and out the country with limits. They are not U.S. citizens and therefore cannot vote in federal elections. They can lose their status if they commit a certain violation or stay outside the U.S. for too long. LPR status is also a key step towards applying for U.S. citizenship. And then next, we have temporary visa holders who are legally in the U.S. for a limited time and specific purposes, such as studying, working, or visiting. They include international students, temporary workers, tourists, and exchange visitors. They are admitted under a specific visa category that sets rules about how long they can stay and what activities they are allowed to do. Unlike permanent residents or citizens, temporary visa holders do not have long-term residency status, and they are expected to leave the U.S. or change their status once their authorized stay ends. And the next, we have refugees and asylees, who are the people unwilling or unable to return to their home country because of a well-founded fear of persecution due to race, membership in a particular social group, political opinion, religion, or national origin. Whereas a refugee seeks status from abroad, an asylee is a foreign national already in the U.S. or at the border. Data shows over 328,000 immigrants from Asian and Pacific regions sought asylum to the U.S. And next, I will pass on to Stephen to cover the concepts of other immigrant groups.
Thanks, Lukia. Continuing on with other types of immigrants, undocumented immigrants are immigrants who generally do not have the legal authorization to be in the United States. So undocumented immigrants actually do make up a large portion of the API immigrant population. About 1 in every 7 Asian immigrants are undocumented. And commonly, when people think of undocumented immigrants, they typically think of those who have never been authorized to come into the United States, such as those who cross the border illegally. However, while that is one type of undocumented immigrant, there are many other kinds, such as those who have been previously granted authorization through something such as a visa or other documentation to come into the US legally. However, that authorization has expired or been lost in some way. A big group within the undocumented immigrants are those who include immigrants who are classified under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals also known as DACA recipients. And so DACA allows certain undocumented people who came into the US under the age of 16 and who also meet other criteria to apply for temporary protection from deportation and also be granted work authorization. DACA participants receive deferred action for a period of 2 years, and they do have the ability to renew their DACA status every 2 years. And there are over 15,000 APIs that are currently DACA recipients. Lastly, we wanted to touch on a special type of migrant, those who are considered COFA migrants or the Compact of Free Association migrants, who are Pacific Islander individuals who are citizens of the freely associated states, specifically those from the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Republic of Palau. So in exchange for U.S. military presence in these countries, COFA migrants can actually live and work in the United States without applying for citizenship. But they are not US citizens or US nationals, and they aren't eligible for many federal benefits, including Medicaid. But however, much like other foreign nationals, COFA migrants can actually become legal permanent residents and citizens in the United States through pathways specified by the Immigration and Nationality Acts. I'm going to pass it back.
Thanks, Stephen. So the next slide shows the naturalization rates across AA and HPI ethnic groups. The rate is the percentage of foreign-born who became U.S. citizens by naturalization. Asian American here at a rate of 60% rank the third highest across races, whereas NHPIs have over half of the population, foreign-born population being naturalized, rank the fourth across races. Southeastern Asian immigrants have the highest naturalization rates on the top, whereas COFA migrants such as Palauans and Marshallese have the lowest naturalization rates. In the next couple of slides, we will shed light on the socioeconomic indicators of AAPI in immigrants and highlight their diversities. The first subject area we want to explore is English proficiency, which is key to immigrants' participation in the economy, their access to services and employment, and their integration into a U.S. society. The census adopts limited English proficiency, or LEP, to measure the English proficiency. It refers to those who speak English less than very well. In the U.S., about 8% of the total population are limited English proficient. Asian American had an LEP rate of 27. However, if we focus on the foreign-born Asians, the rate increases to 41%. Similar pattern is found among NHPIs. The LEP rate of NHPIs is 8%, close to the national average, whereas the rates for foreign-born NHPIs increases to 28%. This bar chart highlights the disparity of LEP rates across the A and HPI ethnic groups. Foreign-born Burmese, Bhutanese, and Vietnamese have the highest LEP rates, all over 60%. The group with highest LEP rate is nearly 3 times higher than the group have the lowest rates here. We also want to share some data points on how immigrants contribute to the U.S. economy. According to census business data, over 80% of Asian and 23% of NHPI business owners are foreign-born. Among them, 13% of Asian and 5% of NHPI business owners are non-citizens. Other data source shows that nearly 30% of AAPI STEM workers are immigrants. These slides highlight the contributions of the undocumented immigrants. In contrast to misconception that undocumented immigrants don't pay their taxes or they steal jobs from the U.S. citizens, the data tells otherwise. The undocumented immigrants actually paying hundreds of billions of tax dollars and contribute billions into Social Security and Medicare. They tend to fill in the labor shortages rather than replacing U.S. workers, particularly in sectors like agriculture, construction, and caregiving. To better understand the financial well-being of immigrant community, we pull out data on the poverty rates for ANHPI population in general and their foreign-born groups. About 10% of foreign-born Asians are under the poverty line, higher than the rate of Asian Americans in general. In addition, 14% of foreign-born NHPIs are in poverty, higher than the poverty rate of general NHPIs as well. If we break down the data further by NHPI ethnic group, foreign-born Mongolia have the highest poverty rate at 24%, nearly 5 times that of the foreign-born subgroup with the lowest poverty rate at 5%. To capture the multi-dimensions of people's economic stability and wealth building capacity, we examine the rate of households that own their homes, which is also known as home ownership rate. Between foreign-born Asian households and Asian households in general, the home ownership rates differ by 2 percentage points. Between foreign-born households and between foreign-born NHPI households and NHPI households in general, the difference is more distinct. Both rates are lower among foreign-born NHPIs. Disparities still exist across NHPI ethnic groups. Some groups have home ownership rates as high as 76%, whereas others with rates that as low as 36%. Another housing-related indicator we explore here is housing burden. According to census definition, high housing burden is defined as spending more than 30% of the household income on housing-related expenses, such as rents and utilities. The census data shows that foreign-born Asian renters have about the same percentage of their households under high housing burden comparing to Asian American renters in general. Among the NHPI renters, the foreign-born households are actually less likely to experience high housing burden comparing to NHPI renters in general. Two foreign-born Asian ethnic groups have over half of their rented households under high housing burden, the foreign-born Mongolian household and the foreign-born Bangladesh households. Another area we want to shed light on is the healthcare coverage. Here we use the uninsured rate to measure it. About 7% of foreign-born Asians do not have any health insurance, slightly higher than the Asian American in general. Among NHPIs, the difference is more distinct, that 15% of foreign-born NHPIs are uninsured, much higher than the NHPIs in general. Some foreign-born Asian ethnic groups have really high uninsured rates, like 27%, nearly 7 times as higher than the group with the lowest uninsured rate. So this concludes my walkthrough of the socioeconomic status of NHPI immigrants. The data suggests that foreign-born NHPIs are more likely to face challenges related to limited English proficiency, insufficient income, and access to healthcare. They are less likely to be under high housing burden than the general NHPIs, but the rates of cost burden households are still high. When we disaggregate the data at the ethnic group level, it reveals that some foreign-born ethnic groups need more support when dealing with those challenges. Next, I will pass my mic to Stephen again to share more data behind the current immigrant trends. Thank you.
Thanks, Lukia. So when we talk about immigration in the current climate, we do have to talk about deportation and arrest. And it's important to understand how these immigration policies and enforcements affect our API communities. And so since Trump's inauguration, there have been over 15,000 APIs who have been arrested, and over a third of that, of around 5,000, have been deported. And so as the graph shows, since Trump's inauguration in January of 2025, the number of arrests have drastically increased. And while the graph does show populations of all citizenships, these trends actually do also hold for the API communities. Compared to the 3,500 APIs arrested during the last 2 years of the Biden administration, over 15,000 have been arrested since the beginning of Trump's. And currently, the narrative with ICE and immigration enforcement is that ICE is only targeting undocumented immigrants with criminal records. However, the data shows that that's also not necessarily accurate, with only about a third of those arrested who have criminal convictions, whereas over 50% of arrestees do not have any criminal convictions at all. Exploring a deeper look into arrests, we can see that the top arrestee countries of citizenships are of China, India, and Vietnam, of which accounts for over 60% of arrests, which is about 10,000, with Indians alone accounting for over 5,500. Generally, this matches the trends with the largest Asian communities already living within the United States, with Chinese, Indian, and Vietnamese communities being the three largest Asian communities in the US. However, there are certain exceptions where the number of arrests account for a higher proportion of the United States population. For example, Laotians are the fourth highest arrested group. They are not the fourth most populated group in the US. The second graph also explores the number of arrests within the Pacific Islander population specifically. Overall, there were over 500 arrests of individuals who are of Pacific Islander nationality. And while that number is generally not that large compared to the raw number of those arrested within ICE enforcement action, these arrests are actually quite high in number compared to their general population overall within the United States. What's even more concerning is that some of the top nationalities arrested include those from the Federated States of Micronesia and Marshall Islands, both prominent members of the aforementioned COFA agreements countries, where a large number of their migrants are actually allowed to live and work within the United States legally. Moving on to looking at the top states for arrests, we do have California, Texas, followed by New York. And these three states make up over 40%, over 6,000 of total arrests. Generally, the top states where API individuals were arrested most often are those with the highest number of API populations. So looking deeper into some deportation trends, as previously stated, there were over 5,000 and counting API nationals deported, meaning about a third of those arrested were deported, with thousands more still within the system awaiting their fate. The highest number of deportations were those citizens of India, China, and Vietnam, which do match the top nationalities of arrestees. And these three countries account for nearly 55% of all total API deportees, or over 2,800 deportees. And we did also want to highlight a couple of overrepresented nationalities in deportation, meaning that the number of immigrants deported for these nationalities are high compared to their number of arrests. And the two most glaring groups are that of Marshallese nationality. So for example, Marshallese represents only 1.6% of all arrests, but over 3.8% of all deportations, and South Koreans, where they represent a bit over 2% of arrests, but over 6% of deportations. So both these stats show that deportees were double that of their arrests. Lastly, with deportations, we did want to highlight something known as third country deportations, where those who are deported are being deported to countries where they are not a citizen of, or nor have they ever lived in. For example, if someone of Chinese citizenship was deported to El Salvador or Cambodia. And the map on the right represents countries that have had agreements with the United States to accept non-citizen deportations. However, it is a bit outdated, and many of those countries who have been approached, so the ones in a lighter orange, they're actually accepting migrants in addition to other countries that aren't on the map right now. And so over 150 deportees were deported to a third country ranging from over 20 different countries, including countries such as South Sudan, El Salvador, and Venezuela. And while immigration officials have stated that these countries that they have agreements with for sending deportees are safe for the deportees, there have been concerns raised about the safety and conditions that the deportees do face when sent to a third country. We did also want to mention visa overstays. So this is one of the categories under undocumented immigration that we wanted to further explore. So someone a visa holder who has lawfully been admitted to the United States, for example, an international student on an F1 visa, but remains beyond their authorized period of admission with no extension to their period of stay or adjustment to another immigration status is considered as someone who is overstaying. And so a large number of API undocumented populations include those who fall within the categories who have overstayed their visas. And actually, overall, visa overstayers do account for about 40% of all immigrants in the United States without lawful immigration status. And as the graph shows, Asian visitors do make up a high proportion of total overstays in general, particularly within the student and exchange visas category and the other in-scope non-immigrant visitors category. However, that's also due to the fact that Asian immigrants tend to receive a higher numeric volume of visas compared to other countries, meaning that they just numerically have more visa holders with the potential overstay. And despite that large number of visas that they do acquire, they actually don't account for the majority of overstayers. In fact, as the graph shows, when taking a look at the graph of total suspected overstay rate, Asian visitors actually have a lower overstay rate compared to total, meaning that Asian visitors are less likely to remain in the United States beyond their given dates across all visa categories, including student and other in-scope visitors, despite the large number of visas granted to them. However, we wanted to talk about visa overstayers because visa overstayers are unique in how vulnerable they are compared to other undocumented counterparts. Because of the fact that visa overstayers entered the United States legally, the Department of Homeland Security has detailed personal and biometric records on them, such as name, date of birth, fingerprints, photographs, contact information, and addresses. And so when exit and exit records indicate that someone is overstaying, ICE can use these records for easily identification and tracking. Unlike those who have crossed the border without inspection or authorization, the reliable information provided by visa holders during their background checks and interviews kind of eliminate the identity ambiguity that complicates enforcement against those without official documentation. So as a result, overstaying violations are easily verifiable, enabling enforcement to arrest them and begin removal proceedings. Despite their compliance with immigration requirements at entries, the heightened vulnerability illustrates enforcement risks that overstayers will bear. So, as part of the Immigration Justice Learning Series, we wanted to bring immigration and immigration enforcement as a prominent issue affecting AAPI communities using data. Regardless of immigration status, APIs have often been seen as others within the United States, being treated as professional foreigners and have experienced systemic exclusion. Current immigration policy and enforcement has added to that sentiment, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, as well as tearing apart API families. Immigrant right groups, along with voices from the Asian American community, have long urged reforms to immigration from U.S. immigration systems and policing, calling for more efficient processes to allow unauthorized individuals to adjust their status and the expansion of legal avenues for foreign nationals to enter and stay within the United States. For those who have built their lives in the United States through school, work, and family, the system should offer more viable solutions because immigration has always been and will continue to be an AAPI issue. So that actually concludes our part within the Immigration Justice Learning Series. While that was just a snapshot of the data, please feel free to visit us or contact us at the links provided on the slide. So there's our website, that's our email, and we do a monthly social media post on our Instagram. And lastly, if you're interested in our additional projects, such as our reports, the Community Contrast website, or the Asian Resource Hub, some of our web tools, feel free to contact us about those as well. Thank you. So yeah, we'll continue Q&A. You're muted, Mary-Lise.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Thank you, Stephen and Lukia. And while we wait for questions to start flowing in, I'm going to get us started with our first question. And that is, if I want to reference data points in my writing or in a presentation, what should I be paying attention to?
I can answer that. So I think first we have data source listed for each of the slides that contains the data points. So when you are referencing them, make sure you verify the data and also include the data source in your report or your proposal. And also there are some limitations with the data we cited here. So for example, for the public use microdata sample from the census, the ethnic groups are defined as the alone category, so which means it only includes anybody identified as like Asian alone or Japanese alone or Chinese alone. Those with mixed race or mixed ethnic identities are not included in the sample. So the analysis could be biased, especially for NHPI populations, because there's more than half of the NHPIs are identified as multiracial. And again, if you had any question or doubts with the data, feel free to send an email to us. Thank you.
Next question we have is, what does disaggregated data reveal about AAPI communities that are often hidden by aggregated statistics?
Yeah, so like Lukia said within her presentation, you can see that when you aggregate a lot of these statistics, it generally kind of masks some of the individuality of certain ethnic groups when they're like, for instance, like as she was saying, there are certain groups that have much higher rates than other groups. So when you lump those two groups together, it kind of averages out, which isn't really great when you're trying to target policies to help a certain group. Instead, you kind of get a general, larger overlook of everything, and then you might be misinformed of how specific groups are actually doing.
Thank you. Our next question is, what can we do to protect immigrants? Is there any legal help available?
Yeah, I can also take that one. So, we did create a website. One of our web tools is the Asian Resource Hub, and that does have a find help resource directory. So it includes those with like free legal services if you're close to like there's a map. So generally, like if you're looking for resources, um, you can go there and you can try to find what's close to you. There's certain other avenues where you can get free legal clinics, like someone mentioned in the chat, certain bar organizations will offer legal clinics. AJSOCAL provides a lot of legal services for free. So just if you want to take a look, like someone's pulling up, you can see that they're just organizations who do offer free legal services there too.
It's a great resource. Thank you, Stephen. Um, our next question is can you clarify if we have data on the suicide rate of AA and HPIs across the US?
Uh, Off the top of my head, I do not know that, but we can look into that for you and get back to you. Feel free to send us an email if you're looking for additional data and stuff.
All right. And then our next question is, why is it critical for policymakers and advocates to understand the intersection of immigration status and economic inequity?
I can answer this one. I think just like we shared here, the immigration issue is also an API issue, and no matter if you are like citizens or immigrants, it affects us all. And there's also a lot of misconceptions, like first, like taking Asians as model minority, assuming they're always well educated and rich and don't need support, which is wrong, as we can tell from the disaggregated data. And second, there's also stigmas about certain immigration communities like undocumented and thinking they're not contributing to the society, which is also wrong. So when for policymakers, when they're making their policies, we really encourage them to look into the disaggregated data sets and try to fight against those stereotypes and to help them like understand what are the real challenges and struggles within the immigrant community.
Thank you so much, Lukia. And just to kind of follow up on that, can you share any examples of how wealth disparities vary across the different AAPI ethnic groups in California?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I will just go to our Community of Contrast website, which is housed under the communityofcontrast.org. And then you can access the data dashboard here by clicking Discover Data. And that shows the data on disaggregated AAPI ethnic groups by different subjects, and also have areas designated to all the states and a couple of metro areas and a couple of counties. So for California, just click California to go to the state. And I believe you wonder about like the economic status, right? So here we can go to the income. And there we have different tables that are all related to their income, such as poverty and low income rates. So it has data disaggregated by the racial group, which is in green, and by the NHPI subgroup, which is in blue. So here you can really tell the disparity across the group. So as see how spread out the blue bars are, that means the disparity among the ANHPI ethnic groups are much higher than that across the green bar, which is the racial groups here. And likewise, you can also explore data on like households with cash public assistance and also per capita income, median household income. Those are all helpful data points that just to explain the disparity across ANHPI groups in their socioeconomics, in their economic status. Yes.
Wow, this is a great resource. Are we able to drop a link to the community contrast in the chat? Anybody interested?
Yeah, sure. I will move it.
Thank you. And then, wow, we have so many questions coming in. I love this. Our next one is, what does it look like to provide support and resources for students to support them and their families? I assume in relation to the political climate right now. Oh, Stephen, your audio is not coming through.
Oh, sorry. Um, yeah, that's a pretty good question. Unfortunately, our research doesn't really touch specifically on students. However, we do think that the data and the data available out there, particularly within the community contrast reports, really does help kind of shed light on different groups. I think there's like an education subsection on there, and it's good in understanding the struggles that students can go through depending on different ethnicities and economic statuses and such and that. If you have anything more specific to ask, that we can provide numbers for, that you can feel free to ask that too.
Thank you. All right, I'll take a few more questions. Here's one. Has anyone studied medical outcomes of AANHPIs within detention centers? Given the proliferation of detention centers across the country and documented instances of death and medical emergencies needs more transparency than ever and as usual. Our community isn't captured in many data sets.
Yeah, so you're correct. In a lot of cases, our community isn't accurately captured in a lot of data sets. And this includes data sets related to kind of immigration enforcement right now. We've kind of had to pull teeth to get really any data regarding arrests and deportations. Luckily, the data that we do have is actually gotten from Freedom of Information Act requests. So we don't actually have public data for that. We actually had to go, well, not us, but an organization had to go out of their way to legally challenge the United States agencies that have that data in order for them to actually like release it to us. So unfortunately, that data right now is very it's not really easily accessible to say the least, unfortunately. And hopefully we and some other organizations can do more in encouraging or forcing the organizations that do have the data to kind of give us a little bit more insight as to what's going on there.
Great. We'll probably take 2 or 3 more questions before we wrap up. Our next one is, which data resources are not counting multiracial NH or AANHPI? Could you please repeat those?
Sure. So in our slides, if there's any data referencing the public used microsample, let me find the example here. Give me a second. Trade. Share. So here, notice the referencing says, saying it's a public use microdata sample. If you see any words like that, that means it's using the along category for ethnic groups. But for general race, like Asian American and NHPIs, they are including the multiracial population. Yeah, unfortunately, this is how the census do their data compiling.
Got it. Thank you. And think this will be our last question for the session. Thank you, everybody, for sending in so many questions. This has been fabulous. Our next one is, Oregon has a significant NHPI population. Can you please repeat the top PI arrest trends that concern, or arrest trends concern you had, especially given the COFA community's legal rights to be in the US?
Yeah, so sure. We can say that even though the raw numbers with the NHPA population arrests aren't large compared to like other groups like Indians or Chinese nationals, the fact that there are so many compared to its population size to the United States. So PIs generally account for a much smaller proportion of the US population, and the fact that there's still quite a sizable number of arrests, even though like 200 compared to like the 6,000 arrests for Indians isn't like numerically a lot, but proportionally it's a lot compared to their own population size in the US. And what's also concerning is that, for example, the top two nationalities, the people from Federated States of Micronesia and citizens of Marshall Islands, they are within the COFA agreement countries, which means that they should be legally allowed to be in the United States to work and to live here legally, right? But the fact that so many of them are being arrested, there kind of is a question of why is that the case when they're actually legally allowed to be here, right? Like who's arresting them? Why are they being arrested? Why are they being deported? Things like that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Uh,
One
so
more thing. We did want to correct something about a statement we made about COFA migrants is that they actually are eligible for Medicaid now.
awesome. Thank you. All right. And with that, I want to thank our speakers today. Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing all of your expertise with us. Thank you, all of our attendees, for joining us. Um, and all for all of your thoughtful questions and committing your time and attention to learn more about the unique experiences of AAPI immigrant communities. We hope that you'll join us again tomorrow at 1 p.m. for the next installment of AAPI Immigrant Justice, where we will discuss the AAPI immigrant experience in healthcare. We're excited to be on this journey together and to build an immigration narrative that is inclusive of all of our community's unique experiences so that together we can counter dangerous generalizations that would hide the true challenges that our communities face. The Zoom link for tomorrow's webinar should be the same as today's, which you will have received when you registered. You can continue to learn more about the AAPI experience through AJSOCAL's many reports and resources, including the Community Contrast website, which we highlighted today. You can find that website through our website at ajsocal.org. We also encourage you to sign up for AJSOCAL's newsletter, which you can also do at ajsocal.org, in order to stay up to date on the latest research, advocacy, and engagement opportunities. The recording for today's presentation will be available on AJSOCAL's website after the AAPI Immigrant Justice series is complete. So please keep an eye out in your inboxes for that and a link to a brief evaluation that will circulate once the webinar series is over. We greatly appreciate your feedback to help us make these sessions as useful and as impactful for you as possible. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.